she is really giving them a thorough going over. Are all judges that thorough? I mean, she
Yes,
looks
yes.
at the teeth.
It's very important that all the attributes are examined. Teeth, eyes, ears,
Ouch.
gums.
Am I seeing right? Where's she putting her hands now?
She's just checking out the dog's testicular area
Oh.
to make sure that everything is intact.
Hate to go out on a date with Judge Edie Franklin, have her judge me. That'd be no fun.
Hey, Jeff. How are you?
I'm doing good, Jim. How are you, sir? I'm finally glad we connected.
Very good. Yeah. I'm good. So we're recording, right? We're not live or anything?
We are recording. We are not live, but
Splendid.
it's the next best thing.
Excellent. How long do you need me for? I love the picture behind you. It's perfect.
5-10 minutes, you know.
Oh, okay. That's easy. There's bullet points, but I've been doing some of these. Some of them are an hour. I did one that was an hour and a half, and some are 5 minutes. So
I won't keep you long. You know, I'm such a fan of yours, so this is a real thrill. There's it's one of those times I can't remember a point in my life where you weren't around. You know, you just always been there. So
well, you get as long as you like then.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And so a memoir. So congratulations. And you must have so many stories. Has it been burning in the back of your mind to get these on paper to tell people?
Well, it hasn't really. I mean, what happened was I did this talk for the Screen Actors Guild in a 200-seat theater called Inside the Industry. And I didn't prepare anything. I was just interviewed by a Wall Street Journal reporter, and I just told stories. And I realized as I was telling them, these are kind of amusing and funny, and the audience seemed to love it. And I was enjoying myself. So I came away after that. I mean, the thing was supposed to last, I think, about 45 minutes, and we went for about an hour and a half. And then I came away and I thought, well, maybe I'll end my long theatrical hiatus and do this as a one-man show. It'd be kind of fun to go around and just play me for a change. And then I started writing it, and it ended up being about 10-hour play. So I thought that might test the patience of any theater audience. So I began thinking about it as a book, and then luckily, I'd say that, you know, with some reservation, but then the pandemic hit. So what would have taken me probably 5 years to write took me about 5 months.
And you arrived in America with $100 to your name. Is that true?
That is correct. Yes, I was a young man in my early 20s, and I was offered a job for 3 months directing a couple of plays, which I'd only done a very limited amount of directing before. And I then did a one-man show while I was in that 3 months. I don't know how I got it on, because I was an unknown actor with a play about a soccer goalkeeper, of all things. And a theater offered me a slot because their first show had fallen out. And so I didn't go back. I was supposed to go back to England, and I ended up doing the show, and it kind of became a big hit for me, luckily. And then about 7 or 8 months later, I was starring on Broadway in a show with George C. Scott.
You know, I was researching for this interview today. Just your list of credits is overwhelming. I mean, it's just amazing, you know, not only but stage and voiceover work and, you know, screenwriting. And I mean, you just accomplished so much in your career. Is there anything left that you're looking to conquer?
Well, it's 45 years now, and I think some people are saying, won't he ever go away? I think that, yeah, I say at the end of the book, I've done an amazing amount of things that I never thought I'd get to do. I mean, a huge, wide range of things: writing, producing, acting in all sorts of stuff I never thought I'd be in. But the one thing I've never done, oddly, is I've never been a regular character on a long-running show. And I kind of fancy that. I love living with a character for a certain amount of time, as opposed to in, you're out. You know, I've done arcs on shows. I've been recurring on a number of shows, you know, Mad About You, the Drew Carey show. There's several shows. And even my show I wrote with Chris Guest, Family Tree. I was sort of a regular on that, but I had like 5 episodes out of 8. So that would be fun to me, to do something in a long-running show. Yeah.
And a screenwriter as well, Tooth Fairy, family classic. I understood that was an inspiration from your daughter?
Yeah. We were having dinner one night when she was 9 years old, and started talking about movies that I was thinking about writing, and I wanted to do a Christmas movie, but I realized everything had been done. So I said, what about the Tooth Fairy? And she loved the idea. And the next day I wrote down some notes, rough notes, and I had a general meeting that week with Jason Blum, who's become the biggest producer of horror movies in the world. And I said, Jason, I got this idea, and he loved it and said, why don't you go away and write it up as a full treatment for an entire movie? And as I did that, I realized that I didn't actually want to write the screenplay. I'd written family movies, and I wanted to write something else at that point. I think it was a drama. And I felt also there were people that could do a mainstream studio movie like that better than me. So it's always good to know your limitations. And so we went out and we got, and I ended up being a producer on it instead, and I took the story by credit, which is nice. But we got Lal Gantz and Babaloo Mandel, who are obviously the old deans of Hollywood. I mean, they've written so many big comedies.
Legends.
And we it was a very smooth experience, actually. It went through the studio system pretty quickly. And I went to the set. I wasn't really that much involved in it. I wanted to be. I said to Fox, you know, I'd like to play one of the older British fairies in the movie. And they said, we've got enough old British actors as fairies, so you can't. And I said, there's 3 lawsuits right there. 3 lawsuits. So I went up for a couple of days, and someone said to me as I came on the set, what do you do here? And I said, I'm an executive producer. And I wrote the story, and they said, what does an executive producer do? And I said, well, it varies from movie to movie, but in this case, it really involves me telling someone who asked me what I'm doing on the set that I'm an executive producer, and that's about it.
Also, rejection.
Yes, exactly. And then I went to, and I met Dwayne for the first time, Dwayne Johnson. And he stopped the shooting and gathered everyone, cast and crew, together and did something that had never happened to me before or since. It was so classy and so way above the call of duty. He said, I'd like you to all meet the one person who's responsible for you all being here and working on this and having a job. And you know, it was such a lovely thing to do. I mean, writers normally are just like, on films, it's different in television, but in films, it's like, yeah, just go over there and please don't come to the set too often. So it was really, I mean, he's a class act.
What a wonderful experience. That's and he's just, and look who went on to be one of the biggest movie stars in the world too. So
yeah, absolutely. And for me, that, you know, as a writer, that was my biggest commercial success as a writer. I think they made over 130 million just at the box office. So
that's amazing. Well, Jim, you know, I'm Generation X, you know, and so in the early 70s, when I was a little boy, this bizarre show that was on late at night that my family couldn't understand that I was laughing at, called Fernwood Tonight.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And there's my first experience with the great Fred Willard. Oh. And since a little boy, and I had a chance to meet him at one of our award shows a few years back, and he's just always been my favorite. And I would think that one of the main things that fans would talk to you about is Best in Show, right? I think that's one of they always talk about that film and your experience on that.
Yeah, it really hit a mark, didn't it? It still works 22 years later, or whatever it is. Fred was extraordinary. I mean, I'd never met him before. I'd met Chris before in Eugene, and I'd flown in from London because I was writing and producing a sitcom there. And I had 3 days to do this. And I met Chris and Eugene, Levy, and Fred on the first night. I'd literally given notes on my sitcom in the morning on Monday, taken a 12-hour flight or whatever it is to Vancouver, and then had dinner with them that night. And so I was sort of told, well, you got tomorrow off because we were running behind, and then had tomorrow off. And then they said on Tuesday night, you got tomorrow off as well, Wednesday, because we were running behind. And then on Wednesday night, they said the same thing. And I said, I've actually got to go back to London on Thursday night. So Fred and I shot all our stuff, which is pretty much throughout the second half of the movie. It's about 40 minutes we're in it, 45 minutes. And we shot all that in one day. It has to be the most amount of film that's ever ended up on screen from one day shoot. And it was literally us in an empty stadium. And you can see in the picture behind you, some extras that were strategically placed to make it look full. And Chris would just show us a bit of the dog show that they'd already shot, or say, okay, this is the hound group, go. And, you know, there was no real, I mean, there was an outline, and some scenes are very detailed and some aren't. And this was one that was just the boorish American and the straight Brit, you know, who knows a lot about dogs. And off Fred went, and I just literally, you know, hung on for dear life.
I would think so, yeah.
This rambunctious monkey, you know, who was driving the car blindfolded.
And as many times as I've seen that film, and, you know, I've done the junkets for Mighty Wind and all the Christopher Guest movies, I'm watching for you just a slight smile or a break, and I don't see it. So I don't know if you're pinching yourself as you're doing these scenes with him, but.
Well, my buttocks were clenched quite tight. I think you will see, if you go back and examine, you see me kind of being amused, but not sort of hiding it, but sometimes just suppressing it because we've got this show to do. So you do see me genuinely sort of smiling here and there, but it comes across as just polite smiling, and I'm actually literally trying not to lose it because it was just so difficult.
But Fred
So
wasn't
you
like
can
that,
see-
right? But Fred
Was
wasn't
that-
like trying to make you break though, was he? He was just
No.
goofing off.
Absolutely. And it worked so well because I start being sort of vaguely amused by him and trying not to laugh, which was really happening, then slightly confused. And then I was able to play being annoyed, so that by the end, when he says something as inane as he's always said, and I finally say, oh, yeah, I remember you said that last year. And it could sort of completely knifes him in the heart. It's like, oh, so I did get my revenge, but it was a real lesson on how to play a straight man, which I'd mostly been the kind of clown in a comedy act before rather than the straight man. So it was great for me to kind of learn another way of working.
And I understand, do you have a Chaplin story too? Because I'm a huge fan of Charlie Chaplin.
Yeah, it was a bizarre one that I only found out in my early 20s that everybody further back than my father's generation was involved in show business. And I thought when I chose to do it, I was being hugely original and doing something no one had ever done before in my family. And then I met this half aunt, my father's half sister, who explained to me in my early 20s, and she told me the whole history, and it was extraordinary. Everybody going back generations had been in show business, and my grandfather was an actor and a comedian, and he had a music hall, a vaudeville act with Charlie and Sid Chaplin in his young days.
Wow.
And when Charlie came back after kind of making it in Hollywood, they'd have dinner, and he twice offered him contracts to come to Hollywood and make movies. And the first time my grandfather spoke to his father, my great-grandfather, who was also an actor and a singer, and said, what do you think? And he said, oh, there's no future in this film business. It's a passing fad. So he never went. And there's another, the second time he went because somebody, I think a friend, got an underage girl pregnant and he had to bail him out. So that was his flight money gone. That's the apocryphal story anyway. So, I mean, they sound like shady characters. I never met him because he died before I was born. But I always felt that sort of romantic notion that when I did come to Hollywood, that I was sort of picking up a loose thread that had been left a generation before.
Were there any family stories about Stan Laurel? Because he was with Chaplin and then Carno in those early days.
No, I know. Yeah,
Yeah.
they were. I didn't hear any about that, but I do remember when I was doing Noises Off on Broadway, they did the Broadway first production. I remember Dorothy Loudon just staring at me one day in rehearsals saying, my God, you remind me of Stan Laurel. And she kept saying it every time. It's Stan Laurel, you're reincarnated. And I could sort of see what she meant. I mean, doing that kind of po-faced, straightish thing.
So do you spend your time between the UK and America, or you call America home now? Or?
I do more now. I mean, America has been my home since 1981 until about, and it's still my home. I'm in LA right now, but I bought a place in London about 3 or 4 years ago, and so I started to work more there. The British public seemed to suddenly discover me, or people there discovered that I'd actually kind of done something in Hollywood, and so they were like, "Oh, well, okay, we can't be too snotty about that," though they try. So I go back. I've been back quite a few times to work, and the last film I did there, the end of last year, was all shot in London, and then I'm going back, I think, early summer to do another film. Yeah.
Well, Jim, you got so many stories. I'm so glad you put them down to paper. And your book's available on Amazon. I want to make sure
It is. It's available now on Amazon, audiobook, hard copy, or ebook. So I think people will be entertained. I hope so.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
a lot of gossip in it. And
I could spend all day talking to you, but I'm going to let you go.
Very
And
good.
visit us in Las Vegas. That's where I am. If you ever come here, I'd love to meet you. And thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you.